Good morning. Welcome to Member Focus Monday. I'm Christina Schaefer, Social Media Manager for HAR. I am joined this morning by Dr. Chad Lemaire. Welcome, Dr. Lemaire.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Lemaire is a psychiatrist. He's also the Vice President of Integrated Behavioral Health and Special Initiatives for Legacy Community Health. I know this is a very busy time for everyone, but especially for you, Dr. Lemaire. So we really appreciate you taking some time with us this morning to talk about kind of managing stress, because as we all know, this is a stressful time. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. This has actually been the busiest year I've ever had as a psychiatrist. I've been in practice for over a decade. A little bit more about myself. I was actually a pediatric nurse in my past career. I mostly took care of kids with cancer and got inspired to go to medical school. And when I started medical school almost 20 years ago at Baylor College of Medicine here in Houston, I was 99% sure that I was going to be a pediatric cancer doctor. And so psychiatry was not what I intended to do, but what I veered towards during medical school. And it makes sense in retrospect because I really enjoy taking care of people holistically and getting to know people on a very personal level and helping them with stress in their lives, which is pretty ubiquitous, right? We all deal with stress.
Absolutely, and especially any cancer patients or family of cancer patients, I can't even imagine. So yes, definitely. So we had some questions for you this morning. This was actually highly suggested from a few of our members to have a mental health professional as yourself on, because and we'll get to this a little bit later, but as you know, you have some realtor clients, but as you know, realtors are basically counselors for their clients in a lot of ways. And so not only are they dealing with their own stress, but they're also taking on the stress of that client and that job. And anyone else who's watching this who's not a realtor, you know, all of us are dealing with a lot of stress right now. So just based on what you've seen, can you tell us just generally how the pandemic is affecting our mental health, and how has it affected our mental health kind of from March until now?
Sure. So I mean, I think first, this is unprecedented, right? We have never faced something quite like this in our lifetime. This pandemic has upended the way we usually live our lives. And so what I've been telling people is there's no playbook or manual for how exactly to deal with this, right? So we're all kind of going through this together on the fly, trying to figure out how to manage these things that are very different in our lives, and those things that are different are wide ranging, right? And they can be different for each of us, but there's some pretty common themes, right? So from the isolation, not being able to be with our family and friends, to people who've lost jobs or who've had hours cut or been furloughed, the economic impact of this pandemic, general uncertainty about how things are going to progress moving forward. People who have kids who've had to homeschool their kids or homeschool their kids while they're trying to work from home. It's just been really challenging. You know, from March until now, it's been interesting because, and lots of people are already doing studies and looking at, like, are we seeing higher rates of depression and anxiety and suicides and things like that? I think personally, for me, with my own patients and with my family and friends, I saw a lot of resilience early on, even from people that I was the most worried about, who have history of, like, going through really difficult times. People who lost homes during Harvey, for example, in Houston. People who have histories of depression, anxiety, or sometimes even more significant mental health issues. I saw a lot of resilience, and even people who were who said, oh, I'm an introvert, or I'm kind of socially anxious, so this working from home or being able to stay home is actually, like, this is great for me. I love it. This is easier. I don't have to commute an hour one way to work anymore. Like, people were kind of seeing some of the positives in it. Around June, early to mid-June, I saw that kind of turn where more and more people, even the ones who were saying that they were resilient and we're all going through this together and I'm gonna persevere and make it through. I just started hearing a lot more people talking about it's wearing on me. The length of time this is going on, the uncertainty about how long it's going to go on, it's wearing on me. The isolation is wearing on me. Even people who are not that social were saying that. And I think it's just a testament to the fact that we're social beings, right? We are connected as human beings. And when we lose the ability to do that as much as we used to. It's really hard on us. I've also seen some people who have not had struggles with depression and anxiety before talk about having that for the first time ever. So I've seen some patients or talked to some friends who said, this is kind of new for me. I've not really experienced that before. And then, there's the other part of grief and loss, right? So whether it's people who've lost loved ones to COVID, and some stories of that I've heard of people who've lost loved ones to COVID, their loved ones died in the hospital by themselves and couldn't have a family member or a loved one with them, which is just, awful. Significant events like weddings and childbirths and graduations and funerals, right? All these things that we do that are significant parts of our lives that people couldn't do in the same way, right? Having to limit the number of people or do it via virtual Zoom or whatever the platform is. I think that there's been lots of grief and loss. And I was talking to some colleagues and friends a couple of weeks ago. I think a lot of us have had a little bit of survivor guilt. Like if we haven't been affected as much, I know I found myself saying, "Oh well, yeah, this and that happened to us, and it's been hard, but I feel guilty for complaining about it or talking about it because so many people have it worse." And I think it's really important to acknowledge our own grief and losses, even if they're not as much as some other people's, right? Because those are still things that are significant, and if we don't acknowledge them and we don't process them, then we're doing ourselves a disservice, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting to hear that you're starting to hear more from people that even people that were very optimistic early on. You're starting to hear that it's wearing on them, because it seems like most of the time maybe we ask someone how they're doing, or they're holding, how you're holding up, and they say, "I'm fine," right? "I'm fine" is kind of the general response, or "I'm doing okay, we're hanging in there."
Yeah.
Why do people do that, and why is it so important to open up to someone you trust and express those feelings, especially now during this time?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really common, right? Whenever you ask somebody in passing, "How are you doing?" to just say, "Oh, fine, I'm okay," even if you're not. I think most people answer that way because you just don't want to get into it, right? Or you don't want to lay your problems or your issues at somebody else's feet, and you think that, oh, it's just they're just asking to be nice, or it's just it's just small talk or a passing comment. When I ask people that, I look them in the eye and tell me how you're really doing. I really want to know. And I think giving people, whether it's our friends or our family members or coworkers, an opportunity to talk about that is really important, because a lot of us hold that stuff in. And it's, we're all going through this. I've been really normalizing anxiety, sadness, grief, even anger, right, about everything that's going on. I mean, it's normal to have emotions. And I think that we've all had a lot of emotions this year. I'd be surprised if somebody didn't have any or all of those emotions at different points during the last several months. I've actually done more with my patients, more judicious self-disclosing about that this year than ever before, not in an inappropriate way, but just letting them know, hey, like it's been a struggle for me and for my family too. Like I've gone through ups and downs with like sadness and anxiety and uncertainty and things like that, just to normalize it. And I think that it's also important to talk about it because people that we trust, who we talk to about that information, can help us figure out if it's something that is, again, at the normal level that we're all experiencing, or something that's more concerning. Certainly, if someone is having anxiety or depression to the point where you feel like it's affecting your functioning in a negative way, then that's the time to reach out to a professional, a therapist, a psychiatrist, talk to your primary care provider about it, get some sort of help, or at least get evaluated to see if you need some sort of help. But we often differentiate like things that impair functioning and might meet criteria for a mental health diagnosis versus just having emotions, right?
Sure.
Anxiety and sadness that are kind of reactive to the situation that we all experience and are pretty normal.
Yeah, that makes sense. So just generally, we're not asking you to diagnose everyone who's watching here today, but just generally, if you could, what do you recommend to patients that are undergoing heightened amounts of stress or anxiety?
Yeah, so I think I wish I had a magic answer for what could help everyone all the time, right?
Sure.
But I think for this, it's really the things that help us be well during normal times too, right? When we're not in a pandemic, it's been more challenging to do some of those things, right? So I'm talking about things like exercising, getting enough sleep, eating a healthy diet, avoiding or minimizing, alcohol and other substances, connecting, spending time with loved ones. And so, what I've experienced myself and what I've heard from a lot of people is, well, it's more difficult to do all of those things right now, when my normal ways of exercising, like the gym was closed, or the gym has limited number of people who can be there, or what I've heard a lot. This was something that actually I heard a lot early on, like more in March and April, was um, emotional eating, eating out of boredom, drinking more alcohol than usual, kind of just whether it was from boredom or self-medicating. And I know a lot of people they were cognizant of that and realized that it was making them feel worse. And so they made a conscious effort to get back to a more healthy level on those things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, making sure that we're focusing on all of those things is really important. I mean, probably now, more than ever. Anything else that meditation, mindfulness exercises, there's tons of apps now that people have on their phones with, waterfalls and rain sounds and things like that, yoga. I mean, anything that you do to help yourself feel better. Also, a big thing lately has been avoiding watching too much news, avoiding too much technology. So, again, I have a lot of patients and friends who have said, and with everything else going on in the world and in the news, I have a friend in Beirut who was involved in the explosion recently, and so it's been hard to not kind of all of a sudden start looking to that, or all of the protests and unrest in some of the cities. I mean, there's just so many things going on. And I've had a lot of patients and friends tell me, I'm really negatively affected by watching too much news.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think finding that balance between staying informed, right, and not watching it so much that it's affecting you in a negative way or making you really pessimistic or sad. And then the technology piece, I mean, I think a lot of people now turn to technology, whether it's social media or just checking things on their phone. And I've heard a lot of people talk about that affecting their sleep in a negative way, right? Whenever we're anxious, one of my things whenever I'm anxious is I pick up my phone a lot more during the day. And if we're doing that too much during the day, or we have too much screen time late at night, it affects our sleep in a negative way, as does alcohol or eating too much, especially
Sure.
late at night. So all those things I think kind of work together. So I think it's just a general kind of taking an inventory of healthy behaviors and unhealthy behaviors, and what makes us feel better and worse, and really focusing on that.
Definitely. I've heard a few people say that, early on everybody was just waiting. They were waiting for things to get back to normal or waiting to do things. And
Right.
now people are just saying, just get out there and make some new normals and do some new things and stop waiting and just live now is a lot of what I've heard.
Right. And even the connecting with others. I mean, we found, I think people are using these types of platforms, these virtual platforms, more to connect with others, which is good. For some people, especially people who are old fashioned like me and like seeing somebody in person, it maybe isn't exactly the same. And I've also heard some people talk about being burned out on these platforms too, like having virtual burnout, right? Because people are using it a lot for work, and if you're doing it with your friends and your family, it's just too much. It's too much staring at a computer or phone screen. And some people have told me that they've purposely like avoided connecting with family and friends because they're tired of virtual meetings.
Zoom out.
It's understandable. So But I think people are finding other ways, right? Doing distance visits. You've seen all the drive-by birthday parties and
Mhm.
things like that. And so I think people are just, again, we're all learning as we go with this. We've not experienced something quite like this before, where you can't have a birthday party
Yeah.
for your kids, or so I think we're doing our best with what the situation is.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you for answering that for us. So again, one of the reasons that we reached out to you is because we had some members ask us. They serve as counselors to their clients in a lot of ways. So how can our members, how can realtors best assist their clients during this time while also taking care of themselves? And I think this really works with anybody that's working, maybe working from home, but specifically for our members, for realtors, how can they accomplish that?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I have realtor patients, I also have realtor friends. So I think I've learned over the years that realtors and physicians have a lot in common as far as um, overworking and not always having great boundaries around work, even pre-pandemic, right? And I know that right now, and then especially when the housing market was a little more uncertain in the beginning of the pandemic. I mean, people are worried about, well, if I don't answer this call or return this text right now, am I going to lose that client, right? Am I going to lose business? And so that's understandable. So I think people have to do what they feel they need to do to maintain their business and feel comfortable about that, right? I think that you also mentioned in general, people are kind of working more, and there's actually been studies about that. There was a study recently that said that people were working an average of 40 something minutes more a day, and I think that our boundaries around work, like especially if you're working from home, it's not like 8 to 5 and you leave the office and you turn it off, right? Like if you're working in your home, um, you can be working at any time. And I
Yeah.
think some of us, especially if we also have kids and we're dealing with them and we think, oh, well, I wasn't working all day, so I need to make up for it. I need to play catch up. It's just, I've heard of a lot of people working, at all hours of the day. And I know for realtors, even pre-pandemic, that's something that a lot of their time is spent outside of other people's work hours, right? Evenings, weekends, things like that. So I think it's just really important to set healthy boundaries for yourself and ask people to respect those. And I think, yeah, there may be some clients for realtors that are not okay with that, but I would hope that most would be. I know when I'm on the client end of any of those types of relationships, I respect when someone says, hey, I can do it at this time, but I can't do it at this time because I have this family thing, right?
Sure.
I say, oh, wow, okay, yeah, that's something that I try and do. And I'm much better at preaching than practicing. I'm much better at telling other people to do it than doing it myself. But I really respect when someone sets that boundary, and I would hope that other people are understanding about that. And if they're not, then have that discussion with them, have that negotiation with them, and I think sometimes you have to make a decision about, is this somebody that I can work with, because you know what we always talk about as physicians is, and in mental health especially, like we cannot be our best selves for the people that we serve if we are burned out, right? We have to take care of ourselves if we want to do a good job and do right by those people that we're helping. And so it's about finding that balance. And I think that'll be different for every person and different for different situations, but it takes a conscious focus on that. I know it does for me, because I can easily, and especially during a time of stress, right? So one of my things in times of stress is that I turn to overworking, right? So I don't have quiet time because I'm working all the time, or I'm staying busy. It may not even be working, but it's staying busy doing something. And so I think, again, just having those times for ourselves to recharge are really, really important. Setting proper boundaries, whatever you feel is appropriate for you, and being willing to shift that, right, if it's not working,
Yeah.
as things go, and just be aware of that.
Yeah, that's great. So you heard that, realtors. Set some boundaries for yourself. um, again, I'm not asking you to try and diagnose everybody right now, but it's just if you could help us out a little bit, to anyone that's feeling overwhelmed right now. What is something that we could do right now to feel better?
Yeah, so I mean, really simple. The one of the things that helps me the most is just stopping to breathe. Do I do it as much as I want to and tell myself to? No, but it's amazing. I mean, again, you don't have to set aside an hour every day to meditate or a half an hour. Like you can stop and take 30 seconds of deep breaths, and that does something to change your physiology and decrease your anxiety, right? And so I'll often do that like in between seeing patients. I say, okay, do I have 30 seconds to, like, if I'm feeling kind of, even if I'm feeling like I'm running behind and I need to catch up and my anxiety's amping up, right? I just end up spinning my wheels if I don't take the time to do that and kind of get a reset, right? So that's one thing that's really, really simple. Just taking slow, 4 seconds on an inhale, 4 seconds on an exhale, holding. Just doing that for like a 30-second or a 1-minute block can be really, really helpful. I think, one of the things that's been really difficult this year is having a sense that we don't have control. And again, for someone like me who is a perfectionist and likes to have control of things, it's disarming. And but there's always things that are out of our control, right? And so focusing on the things that you can control. Like we may not be able to control everything that is happening in the world, but we can control somewhat how we react to it, right? And are we going to get really, really pessimistic and say, oh, woe is me, there's no point in like doing anything anyway because everything's like going downhill? Or, do we say, okay, what can I do to kind of make my situation better, to help other people, right? To help my friends, to help my family members, the people that I care about, to connect with them. I think that these types of things, a crisis can break us down, but they can also help us to be better people. There's this thing called post-traumatic growth, where adversity makes people actually more resilient, and makes them, more willing to want to help others. I mean, of course, we see that in big disasters like Hurricane Harvey, again, for those of us in Houston, right? We saw countless stories of people rushing to others' help and just doing these amazingly kind things for others. And I think we're seeing that again with this. And I think it can help to, not ignore, not be in denial about the difficult things that are happening, but to focus on the good things and what we can do to improve our situation, help others. I think one thing that I've heard from lots of people and that I've felt myself this year is, uh, you know, not taking life for granted, right? Life itself, like actually having a life and our relative health, but also life as we knew it. I think there were a lot of things that we probably took for granted that now we say, well, gosh, I'll never take that for granted again. And I just think it's an opportunity for an increased focus on connection to others, on important relationships in our lives, on being kind to each other, on focusing on helping each other, and also asking for help if we need it, right? Like we talked about earlier. If somebody asks you how you're doing, assume that they really want to know, and they're asking because they really want to know.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that even like you're saying, the person asking, that has changed. That used to be just something that would get you into conversation, but now people really want to know, how are you doing?
Yeah.
I do see a lot of comments going on in the comment sections from our members. Some tips for devotionals. Dan King even said, if anybody wants to message me for some smiles, feel free to. So, kind of reaching out to each other there in the comments section as well, which is
Gratitude
amazing.
journals, yeah, anything like that. I mean, just again, some kind of way to have a period every day where you focus on, there's some people who have those books of inspirational quotes or whatever it is that works for you. I mean, absolutely. I think all the more reason right now to focus on those things than ever.
Yeah. This actually leads us into our next question, but just to share something personal, we started that with my daughter, who's now 4. What was your favorite part of the day, is what we started asking her a while back, just to kind of recount our day, but it's actually been beneficial, I think, for all of us. What was a great thing that we did today? So leading into that, though, and I did see a question I promised that I'll get to about loss from Brenda, but to parents or caretakers that are watching this program, what can we do to help with the mental health, or take care of the mental health of the loved ones that we're caring for? And I know this is a huge topic, and you did an hour-long presentation about this before, but
Yeah.
if you could, just a few tips for, people that we're caring for, whether it be children or maybe elderly parents or anything like that.
Yeah, and so and I know I shared some resources with you for talking to kids
Yes.
and dealing with our own families. So I won't belabor that because I know we're running short on time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can talk about that for an hour. But I think the most important things with kids, no matter what their age, is to give them information that they can digest, that's appropriate for their developmental level. To be honest with them, but not to give them too much information. So we have twin daughters who are 7, and at the beginning of this, they started asking us, right? They were hearing about it at school before they stopped going to school back in March, and they the question that they asked was, what's going on with this coronavirus, and are you guys and our grandparents going to die of it? And I was like, oh, okay. So you guys know about this, and we're going to talk about it. And so I just gave them really concrete information about what it was, that yes, people were dying of it, but it's very unlikely that any of us would die of it. But like, kids will know when you're lying to them.
Sure.
So it's giving them honest information. Like, usually they just want information, right? Like, just like we do as adults, with information, with accurate information, that even if it's distressing or anxiety provoking, like, I actually get less anxious with information. And so there's lots of great tips on those resources. I encourage people to go to those. They come from reputable sources, national sources, on talking to your kids, and talking about this with your family.
Very good. And I know we just have a few more minutes, but Brenda did ask, a family had some loss, and she was basically saying, how do you help the after effects of family members, when they're dealing with loss?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing with loss and with grief is just being there to listen. Not you can't necessarily fix it. You can't necessarily make people feel better, but just listening. And offering to be there to listen, right? Again, so sometimes people won't talk about it unless you ask them, or you give them that opportunity, and you let them know, hey, I'm not asking just to, like, look like I'm being nice here. I really want to know. And if the person's not ready to talk about it, or not ready to talk about it a lot, and they tell you that, just let them know, hey, I get that. I want to respect your space, but know that I'm here if and when you want to talk about it, right? And I think that goes a long way to helping people through that. We just want to know that there are people there that we can share with, because a lot of times it's a very lonely place to be, or it feels like a lonely place to be, even if we know lots of other people who are going through similar.
Even more so now during this time, that a lot of people are
Yeah,
feeling lonely in general. So,
yeah.
um,
During the isolation, I mean, it's more important now than ever to let people know that you're there, because sometimes I've seen an out of sight, out of mind thing, right? Like, oh, well, I'm not going to reach out to my friend because they might be busy, or they might be working even though it's 8 p.m., because we're all working at all hours of the day. They're busy with their family, or they have, like, we make up these things in our mind that they're not available, or they're too busy, or if we're not, like, interacting in the same ways that we used to, we don't have those opportunities. So I think we have to be more conscious of being proactive about reaching out. So, and if you're on the other end, again, reaching out and saying, hey, let me know if this bothers you, or if you want me to stop, or if it's too much, but I might text you once a week and just check in and see how you're doing if I don't hear from you, right? So just making sure that we're being proactive about staying connected, and offering to be there for those people.
Right. And to that point, one final question that came in: what should people do to identify clients, friends, family, etc., that might be overly depressed or anxious? What are some ways that we can identify those people?
Yeah, so I think, asking them, and there's, you can find anywhere online the actual criteria for, like, a major depressive episode, or for more significant anxiety, but asking them to be honest with us, but also looking for these cues, right? Like, and it's really difficult right now, because, like, one of the cues is, like, a lot of isolation. Well, a lot of people are isolating even if they're not overly depressed or anxious. But anything that seems abnormal, right? That's not like them. They look sad. They look anxious. They are withdrawing from any types of social connections. People talking about kind of doom and gloom stuff or very negative, and if that wasn't like them. Um, Talking about wishing that they were dead, or even about like wishing that their life was over, right? Some people will bring that up in passing, and it's important to not be scared of going there with them, right? Usually when people bring up something like that, they're vulnerable and they're looking for help. And so, asking them about those things, asking about suicidal thoughts or thoughts about death doesn't make people generally more likely to follow through on those things. It's actually often a relief to that person that, oh, this person heard me, or they're asking about that, and like this is somebody that I can talk to about this and that won't judge me, right? So I think just looking for any kind of signs that something is not the usual, and just being proactive about asking about it. Again, not being afraid to ask. Worst thing that can happen is that they say, no, I'm actually fine, and maybe they're not, and you need to press a little bit more. But I think just keeping our eyes and ears open and our hearts open to those that we know well, and asking.
Wonderful. This has been so helpful. A lot of people thanking you in the comments. I know you have
Oh, thank
patients
you.
you need to get back to. So, are there any final thoughts or final words that you have for our viewers?
I think just what I mentioned earlier. I mean, I have a tendency to get, especially with all the things I see as a psychiatrist and just kind of seeing things going on in the world, to get kind of pessimistic at times. And I think it's like this year has actually, for me, helped me to really have a lot of gratitude for the position that I'm in to be able to help people. I've never been more grateful. I've never been more busy, but I've also never been more grateful to be able to use my life to help others. And so I just encourage other people to do that. I know it's a time where it seems like we're divided on so many things and people are fighting about so many things, but I think we're all in this together, and just looking for ways that we can connect and share our commonalities, and be humans that care about each other. I think just focusing on that, and if more of us could focus on that, again, and I'm not being Pollyanna about this, I'm pretty pessimistic by nature, but I think kind of focusing on optimism, and that if we do our part, right, if we do our part to be a positive influence on others, hopefully more and more people will do that, and the world will be a better place.
Yeah, wonderful. So many great tips today. Reach out to the people that you care about. Reach out to the people in your life. One huge takeaway I got is I need to stop ignoring my watch when it tells me it's time to breathe. I tend to ignore that, so I'll start breathing.
Yeah.
Well, again, this was wonderful. Again, a lot of people thanking you in the comments, so we really appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you. I'm happy to do it.
Thank you. Well, so that is it for this Member Focus Monday. Next Member Focus Monday, we are going to be discussing property management and leasing questions, concerns, issues that have arisen because of coronavirus and this pandemic that we are in. So be sure to tune in next Monday at 9 a.m. Have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.